This is the GIMI think tank. This is a weekly platform that GIMI has established since COVID. Basically, every week we talk about a cutting edge trend or the state of innovation of a country or a GIMI tool, basically, or GIMI progress around the world in 25 countries where we have different partners around the world in 6 continents. We have had so far, I believe, around 200 experts, subject matter experts and speakers who come and talk about a great or a hot topic of the decade, of the month. And today I'm really glad that we have Carlo and Domenico, and I'll leave to Massimo to introduce, but we have a very interesting topic about space for non-space business and what space application can do for your company. I think I'm really looking forward myself to understand more on this topic. One thing that I would like to mention is that after each speech, we basically edit the recording, and you will find that in our library of speakers. So the speakers of today will be featured in this library. You will find in YouTube, but also we will prepare a think tank insights, which is a 2-pager about this topic, where you can learn more if you missed this webinar. So Massimo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kirilla. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everyone around this virtual table. It's I'm really thrilled and honored to have the chance today to have here Domenico, Caprioli, and Carlo Saverio are speaking to us today about space for non-space. Now, space has always exerted a powerful fascination on every one of us, but I think that this has always been a fact when we were looking at the stars. What if and what's else, who is up there, what is happening? And we all know that space research or space has been the cradle or the driver for many innovations that impact our daily lives. So a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, I met Domenico in Rome, and he was telling me about this interesting thing to understand what is going on in the space, and trying to understand how can we use these innovations that are in space industries and make them usable for the non-space organizations, from health to materials and so on. So a quite complex theme to discuss, but no worries about that, because we have 2 great professionals today speaking to us. Domenico, who is the director of Next4 and Geoscience Edu, which is a great training firm based in Rome, GIMI is cooperating with. And we have also Carlo, who is director of CREST, the Center for Research Engineering for Space Technologies, who is the first research contractor for the European Space Agency. And he's also a big contractor consultant also for NASA, and also for his advisor for the European Commission. So we are in great hands. Gentlemen, the stage is yours, and really thrilled to have you here today with us and to listen to your space for non-space suggestions.
Thank you, Max. Thank you all. So I will briefly introduce our project, and so me and Carlo as well. And then I leave the floor to Carlo, who's the most entitled to represent our extensive experience in space applications. So Carlo and I met in Brussels back in 2014, when we both worked for the European institutions, albeit in very different roles. So we share the point of view and start to collaborate And only a few years later, it happened that Euroscience BC came. It's our research and technology transfer agency, which today still focuses on space applications and advanced materials. We are mainly interested in applications. So we are neither space enthusiasts nor technology enthusiasts. We are interested in the impact that technology can have on people's life, and so hopefully to improve people's life. And in dealing with space, we noticed that for many people, practically all of them, space is something super cool. So we are all, in a way, space enthusiasts, but we perceive space as something super cool again, but very distant, as if it didn't concern us. So I always say that we look at space like the 100-meter final at the Olympic Games. And so we are very proud that someone else has a guy of our species runs so fast, but I'm quite sure for myself, I guess the same for you, so we will never do it. Instead, space is already today, now, something really important, and something that has a real impact on our lives and also on business. And realize that we needed to change the narrative, the storytelling about space. And we need to propose space first to non-space companies, telling them how space can impact their business today. Because, you know, today, choosing space, exploring space and its applications and its opportunities is something related to a positioning choice. Tomorrow, it will be the standard. That's why with Carlo and other business partners, we launched the Euroscience Edu project, because we felt the importance to talk about space to non-space businesses and to tell them you are losing your opportunity to make this a positioning choice, to make this a competitive advantage. And tomorrow it won't be the chance to have a competitive advantage anymore, but you will be forced to follow a standard. And as I was mentioning, we deal with space applications, which means that, yes, we use microgravity and we are interested in advanced materials. Carlo is one of the most prominent scientists in the world for these topics. But indeed, our field of applications are very wide. We go from the agriculture, which is a very conservative sector, and still it's one of the most interested by this revolution, because we are talking about an actual revolution. We go from agriculture, I was saying, to pharmaceutical industry, drug discovery process, drug factories. And maybe 1 month ago, exactly 1 month ago, SpaceX brought to space the very first factory, space factory, and it was for the drug production. And Carlo will tell us why it's so convenient to reason about producing drugs in space. So I will leave the floor to Carlo, which will discuss, will tell you about our direct experiences. So we will talk about space, referring to you what we do every day as researchers, as scientists, as let's say, on the business side like me. Then I will take the floor again, take the floor back to give you some hints about our vision of space for remote areas, which is a very important aspect in our opinion. So, Carlo, go.
Thank you, Domenico, and everybody. Thank you also for the nice words from Massimo. Maybe too much. But in any case, it's true that I am a bit in the space sector since the beginning of my career. I am also an engineer that works on space, aerospace engineer. So I should say that the word of Domenico are very wise, especially for what concern the revolutionary character of this period. You know, we should, just before I will tell you a bit more about the technologies and what is going on, why is advantages, it's very important to understand that I can compare this moment in time for the space exploration, but also for the space commercialization as more or less the end of the 80s, beginning of 90s, with the advent of PCs and software and so on and so forth. So we are not only renewing this interest for space, but in these years, agency on one side, but more and more commercial entities and companies are laying down the foundations of what will become possibly an extension of our Earth. So we have to begin to think that especially the low Earth orbit, that in this moment is the closest to Earth and open for exploitation and commercialization, will not become anymore like now an environment where times to times someone will go and check or satellite will be launched for, but it will be basically a new surface of the Earth. It's a bit like someone will inflate our Earth and will become a bigger ecosystem where the interaction with the surface will be continuous. Now, of course, I don't know if you have already, some knowledge about how the gravity stuff works, but of course, the space is not only about microgravity. There is, for example, now the exploration frontiers that is moving to Mars, to the moon. But we can say reasonably that the human presence will expand to space most and foremost in the next 10 to 15 years in the low Earth orbit. This will be the first population waves. And why microgravity is important? We can understand this from a ground perspective by reversing the paradigm of our activities. So we have to think what in our life and in our ecosystem depends on gravity, So for example, imagine that you are producing chemicals that can be from drugs for pharmaceutical, but can be because we have to think that the chemistry as a whole is one of the bigger industry in the world. We should not forget that the production of ammonia has changed basically the possibility to exploit soil. So we have chemicals, and then we can say the diamond tip of the chemicals that are the drugs. But when we produce all these kind of chemicals, there are different phenomena that play a role. First and foremost is sedimentation. So If you ask, for example, I had a couple of projects with some pharmaceutical multinationals. What is one of the main problems when you have cancer drugs, but also normal drugs like an aspirin, is that the active principle, the bigger the crystal growth, the more subject to the gravity is. So it means that, just to give you an example, if you take an aspirin pills, I don't know if you ever thought about that, you take an aspirin and say, oh, I still have an headache because like this. This is a very possible because the active principle are unevenly distributed, you know, in pills, in drugs. And of course, this is not important for an aspirin. You take another one or others, but imagine now for a cancer cell. So sedimentation creates uneven distribution in the production of chemicals and drugs, but also, for example, convection. I mean, we know that in large scale, convection is what determines the distribution of weather and in the longer terms of the climate cells that regulate the climate on ground. So all of this is because there is an up and down, and this up and down is determined by the presence of the gravity. Imagine now that you want to create some materials. Now, I don't want to go deeply in the problem of engines like the eutectics mixture and so on and so forth. But you know very well that, especially in the automotive, one of the limitations in the performances of engine is the way the solidification phase, because you create a melt and then you solidify things, distribute the crystals. I see Massimo is crying. I will not be so, Massimo, I will not be so technical anymore, but just to make important. Now,
Carlo, I'm not crying. I'm just amazed to understand things that I didn't know before.
And so what does it mean? That our engines are limited in performances. That means that for a single unit of fuel, we can go faster. That is the, we can say, the polluting way, but we can also go longer. And so it means that we can spare fuel, we can get a better contribution to the environment overall. Now, just to give you an idea, imagine that all these causes that basically represent the ecosystem, but also the production, but also the exploitation of the soils, but also the way we look at our own condition on ground is removed. So from the upper side, like Domenico was saying, you can see the humanity all together. You are not looking at your own field, but you can see soil distribution, water distribution in large part of the earth, at least of the cultivated soil. And this will allow to spare water, to use pesticide in a better way. If we go on space, I said we remove sedimentation, we remove all the kinds of convection. So imagine that, for example, instead of having a crystal of proteins that are one of the bases then for healthcare drug production, you can have bigger crystals, less contaminated, not contaminated, crystals that are of highest purity. And you can separate them much better than you can do on ground. Imagine that you can create materials that are of high performances because during the process of melting and solidification, you can have a more homogeneous engine, for example. And believe me, that the management of thermal energy is the biggest problem in relation to the climate change issues. You know, in the to make clear to the large people, a lot of time we say, oh, the production of energy. But who knows the situation on the fields knows that the biggest problem is the heat, and the heat can be better only if we have better materials, better processes, better procedures. So by the experience that we have in terms of developing new technology in space, we can bring, not only go on the outer frontier for exploring Moon, Mars, but we can get back to Earth with a bunch of solutions that are driven by what space is. You know, I have done a lot of cooperation for development in Africa, and Domenico that knows me, I've been around in Zambia, Mali, Cameroon, and so on and so forth. And at that time, I was teaching sanitation of water by low-cost, systems. But what was all about? It was about the using scarcity when there is no abundance of them, by becoming on one side clever, on the other side more efficient. But as we like to say each time with Domenico, what is space? Is the paradox of scarcity. You don't have water. So it means that if you want to go to space, you have to do better membranes for recycling. Every drop of the water, I don't want now to go and to become a very graphic, but you know that urine or what other stuff of the astronauts are recovered up to the last drop. And then you have an hostile environment, you have radiation, you have something that basically is capable of destroying what we are producing. So it means that we have to create hardened materials. And then because of that, the health of our body is subject to loss of vitamin D, is subject to problem in the cardiovascular system, is subject to problem in the lungs because of the contamination, the humidity on the moon, lunar dust, and so on. So basically, all this solution should be tested on space, go back on ground, become a process, and go on two directions. One, to get better in our ecosystem on ground, and to go back in space to give a final product and to produce in space. So, and I finish with this. So we should think really that the space will become another Earth. Like now I am moving from Brussels. I've been in Dubai, Japan, Korea. Now in the future, in order to do project or to produce new formulation for drugs, in the future, we have acquired a new dimension. Instead of moving on our surface, we will move also up and down. And new dimension means new opportunities, but means not only, also risks, because, I am happy to have been invited here because space is still seen as something for reach or agency or defense and so on. This is what we are trying to do. Democratize space, bring non-space, because people that do business in non-space, that teach in non-space, that use space for ground, will basically help changing the actual paradigm. So, of course, I'm open for question, but think about this. We were on a surface, and now we are getting to another dimension. And this new dimension is full of opportunity that we can transform, in opportunity for the full mankind. So, Domenico, just for you to
Thank
close.
you, Carlo. So just a few words about a topic which is for us very, very significant and also very promising. So as a researcher, one of my topics was the feature of the remote areas. I was studying communities and innovation in communities, in both urban and rural communities. And what I found charming of space was its feature of being the remote area par excellence. It's a place where there is a scarcity of everything. We have actually a scarcity of usable raw materials. We found them, but in not a usable form, not a usable shape. So we have scarcity of water, of oxygen, but the most significant scarcity is that of skills. We cannot bring to space specialized personnel. We cannot bring them into the infrastructure in the low orbit, as well as in the lunar and Martian venture colonies, which force us to make an enormous effort to compress advanced knowledge into technology. In this regard, we must consider that technology, as well as so-called innovation, is in a way nothing more than phase in the knowledge cycle. Let us say a solid phase. Almost 4 years ago, I attended TEDx. To explain this concept, I used the example of the apps of the mobile phone. An app is something that backend is practically incomprehensible to most of us. On the other hand, front end is so elementary and intuitive that my niece, when she was just 2 years old, ordered a pizza by herself. And so my sister found the delivery man at the front door without knowing why. The knowledge transformation process is very similar. Knowledge that it's complex and not usable by most people becomes a device that can be used by everyone. So an app. And we make an effort, we struggle every day to turn knowledge into usable technology and to enable person without specific skills to replace, at least partially, a specialist. And mind you, this is also, and this is my point, the great challenge we face in remote and scarcity-stricken, but much closer areas, inland and rural areas. Which is a context that we experience on a daily basis, because it affects, in Europe, for instance, it affects something like 20% of the European population. I guess that in the USA is much more. To these people who live in underserved place, from which they are often forced to move away, which of course further impoverish the fabric. Space offers great opportunities. We must consider that space is very democratic, as Carlo was saying, and we have a proof. We have seen this unfortunately in the last few months during the war in Ukraine, where Starlink has been able to provide with the internet the country while it was under attack. So satellites, in a way, don't give a damn of war, of poor ground infrastructures, which are very expensive, and of any other stuff. So they are very, very open to anyone. And I'm not saying that we will replace human skills with technology. I'm saying that we can, in a way, give a relief from this scarcity, which is unequal, because we have a completely different life standard in the cities and in the rural and inland areas. And we can give a relief from this condition through the space applications. And so space is not only a very cool race, and as Carlo said, also very important for business. And it's not even a waste of money, which we could use for improving the equality around the world. Is, at the contrary, a way we can use to improve the performance of agriculture, to make it more sustainable, more democratic, to make it more affordable, to make services and specialized services more affordable for everyone. So in a way, space is a way, and maybe an unexpected way, to make more democratic the access to technology and advanced services. And I'd say that we end our time, so let's leave the floor to Q&A. I noticed some questions in the chat box. Maybe
may I pose your question, Domenico? When I met you in Rome, you told me that you had some presentation with a couple of small and medium-sized enterprises, and you saw these, let's say, old-style entrepreneurs who were amazed or fascinated by thinking about the space. Space is something magic, right? And you explained them how you can democratize space or the innovation up there in an easy to grasp way, also helping them to bring this technology in their business models. And this was something that made them dream. People who are, from a certain point of view, quite conservative, but when they hear something about space, you are able to open their dreams, to open their minds, right?
Yeah, true. I will tell you a short story that I use quite often when I discuss about the space impact, but it changed me and changed my perspective. So I was working as the responsible for the R&D of a very big territorial technology transfer project. And I was visited by a small entrepreneur, rural, so a farmer basically, who had so a small field of grains and something like that. So he was interested in satellite-based technologies. And I was very surprised because we were testing them on huge surfaces. So I asked him, you have such a small field, such a small state, why are you so confident that this technology can help you? And he told me, so it's because I'm so small. So I'm so small. I'm being so small. I won't have, I will never have any kind of control on the final leverage, on the market leverage. So I won't be able to make the price of my product. What I can do is only to control so how my business works. And if satellite technology can reduce my costs of 30%, I will have, in a way, a safe space of 30% to resist to the big players trying to put me down, to put me off the market. I guess that this is very, very significant. He was a very small entrepreneur, and so he got that space is for, I won't say for all, is for more. I mean that it's much more affordable, especially now, and Carlo can explain better than me how the prices have changed in few years. So it's much more affordable now, for instance, for agriculture, to buy a SAT-based service than to buy a drone with the operator and to use it to make precision agriculture. Wow. So I was
Yes,
reading.
I was
Yeah.
reading. So first I was complimenting Vlad because he's doing a project about debris, and we know that you know, it's one of the problems that we will have, especially in the future. I should say that we should consider that the debris problem is a problem that will become more and more evident the more the LEO, so the low Earth orbit, will be populated. Without forgetting that we will pass from a sphere and to a volume, so still there is a lot of space in space. Just to paraphrasing a bit Richard Feynman. I will start with the second question.
I think Carlo, I think Vlad has raised his hand. Maybe.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Vlad.
Thank you. Just to comment shortly. So I had a studio, an innovation studio, and we're developing different ideas. And one of them was in connection with, identifying debris in space and creating a dynamic map of everything that is bigger than a screw. Right now, we don't know, but there are about 2 million pieces that are bigger than a screw out there. And every single piece of this can destroy any satellite because they're flying at 600 kilometers an hour and they just explode. So, and the idea was to develop this map and sell it to a reinsurance company like Munich Re, for example, who is insuring all the assets in the near Earth orbit. So this is what the project that we developed. We presented at the European Space Agency, and they've supported us with a small grant. What happened is that I sold my shares in the studio, and when I left the studio, this is one of the projects that I was allowed to take with me. So right now I'm trying to develop this project from scratch, and if anyone is interested, please feel free to contact me.
Maybe now I don't want to be like a marketplace, Massimo, here, but Vlad, find me on LinkedIn because we are working about different kind of projects. Then there was a question from Gianluca. No, thank you. From Gianluca. Cost of experiments in microgravity. Well, this it's strongly depending on how the experiment is done. So if it's done, because the cost is a composition of several parts, of several voices. That is the launch, of course, the payload that you want to launch, and the time of the crew, among the others, for doing the experiments, or if it's a fully automatic experiments, the time to process data, downlink, and so on and so forth. And so the cost can vary from zero. That is, for example, if there are a lot of possibility, especially for research, to be funded through agency, but also indirectly through agency and as a support for industries, to few thousand euros. That is, for example, in the case where, like most of the ESA schemes, where ESA is offering the ticket for flight, even the commercialization scheme, now even the European Commission. I'm speaking about Europe, but I'm sure that even, for example, in Dubai or in India, there are a similar scheme. and of course in the United States too. Up to, and then of course the cost depends on the kind of the size of the payload and so on and so forth. Just to give you a rough idea, if you, for the moon, that is now the most expensive, consider about 1 million per kilogram. For the low Earth orbit, cubes, the ice cubes, so the small modules go down up to 5,000-6,000, depending on the, but even less depending on the kind of funding, the project that you want to test, the importance given by the industry or by the agency. Most of the time, whatever is, I can give you just a sharp frontier, even if it's not the most precise one. We can say that up to TRL 3-4, you are still in the domain of being able to get it for free. After is becoming more, complex, but the logic is also that the more you go to the market, so you test something that you can resell in terms of results, of course, it is becoming less, possible that you will receive something that is at full commercial level. But the costs, I cannot be precise because as in the space sector is known, are decreasing, I don't want to say in a daily basis, but really on a monthly to yearly basis, especially because now there is a strong push for using even in space COTS, so things that are already in the market, commercial stuff, and this has decreased the cost, substantially. So I've been 2 months ago in Abu Dhabi. I have a collaboration with the Khalifa University, and they were building a CubeSat at a cost of a few hundreds of dollars, the payload. So just do calculation, Gianluca, but it's becoming, very advantageous. For the solar power, now I don't want to do some sort of launch for the program of the European Commission, but there is a lot of opportunities in space-based solar power, and opportunities that are becoming more and more realistic by considering the huge number of research projects on microwaves solar conversion to be directed towards Earth and in a orbit-to-orbit way. So solar panel in space can have an advantage in the future if you manufacture the panel in space. Up to now, there is a lot of interest for especially powering around. You know that for orbiting and deorbiting services. So solar power is the base of the economy. And so the companies that are working in this sector will have more and more opportunities to sell their services, both horizontally, orbit to orbit, and in the near future, I hope maybe 5-10 years, towards also the ground. Mining, of course, the mining of asteroids is a bit like the holy grail for the moment, because of course, I don't want to say that it's impossible, but it's another generation for the moment. We can go robotically in much sooner, but we are speaking about the survey. So just to tell you, I have proposed at the European Commission to create first and foremost a survey of the asteroids composition, a geological survey, because mining as so we have to distinguish two different aspects. One, like Domenico was saying, we are space enthusiasts, And the enthusiasm will bring us, for example, oh, I want to go on an asteroids. You know, the European Space Agency thought about Rosetta, the first. There is a new missions to land on asteroids, mission to Encelado, mission to Europa, mission to, you know, Mars, Moon, and so on. And this is okay. This is, of course, the first wave. But then we have to consider what and how we can use the knowledge in order to do the better for the mankind, both the mankind that will stay on Earth and the one that will create the future outputs. And this we have to be a bit more realistic. But to me, for asteroid mining, of course, there is, if you want my opinion, this is an economical problem, in the sense that the moment we will be able to mine the asteroids, I don't know how the raw material economy, that is still big part of the world economy, will be changed. This is a completely different sector. Already, you know, there is all this idea of helium on the moon. There is a lot of material exploitable on the moon. I don't know. So it's more complex, but everything will take place. So raw materials for mining, but we have to think in a longer period. I would start with a geology, solar power in space, go on for opportunities. This will be one of the first wave of commercialization on business from ground and foreground of non-space businesses. I am quite sharp. I hope that
Thank
people.
you, Carlo. Thank you for the response. I think there is another question there in the chat from Roberto, and then Ronald has raised his hand.
Okay, so I can reply to Roberto. So basically, we have 2 or 3 ways. So 2 or 3 funnel of space helping non-space businesses. The easiest one is obviously space as a market. So we have some technology and also some capabilities which now have a new market. And I mean that we have a market which is now represented not only by the space missions, space exploration mission, but ESA and NASA and the NASA are now investing, as well as, of course, the Japanese agency and so on, are now investing on life support on the moon, for instance. And so this is an opening market which will drive us to reproduce for the lunar colonies more or less the same assets we have on Earth. And this is so space as market. And then let's consider space as a lab. And I was mentioning before how satellites can improve the cost effectiveness of agriculture. I will do another example in the same field. So we drove an experiment with prominent Italian university for the wine. So it turned out that the grape release a signal of chlorophyll when it's perfectly ripe. And this is very important, not only because it allows to have better wine, but even more because we are going towards a time of, so we call them climate change, but for the farmer, it's okay. And 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I was harvesting my the grapes in September, for instance, and now it's already dry at that time, or maybe it's not ready for become wine. And having this kind of quantitative signal help the farmer to, of course, adapt to a changing world. And then we have the production. And so Carlo in particular had an experiment for a company dealing with frying pre-cooked products. And due to the fact that in microgravity it is very easy to study the dropping phenomena, they studied and they improved the existing technologies for frying food and for processing, so in industrial food. And so another very recent experiment, so we proposed to an Italian company dealing with chocolate, high quality chocolate, to test how they can improve their product with microgravity, because the isodensity enable a better distribution of all the organoleptic features of the chocolate as well as of any other food. And so a couple of days ago, we read about the results of this research for a small companies doing that with chocolate. But also we have huge impact. We can have huge impact for the pharmaceutical industry. And with Carlo, we had a very interesting research with Imperial College on the drug delivery systems. So let's consider that on the Earth, if we want to study the drug delivery systems, we unfortunately we need persons, because we need to study how the molecule gets to the yield cell, and not hitting. So of course I'm oversimplifying, but not hitting the healthy ones. And in microgravity, we can easily and fastly reproduce three-dimensional tissues, where we can test several drug delivery technologies and approaches. And you all know that they are in a way the state of the art of the current medical research, and also tissue regeneration. But let's go back to maybe more common industry, advanced mechanics. We can we used microgravity and space application for developing the design and also the material setting of new components for automotive sector, for of course aeronautical sector, and even for coating, how the coating can react to. So in space we have such an extreme and harsh condition in terms of thermal management, in terms of radiation, that we can easily and very effectively test. Yeah. Okay.
I was answering in the chat to Roberta.
So
yeah, that's fine.
Domenico,
So just finish then, Carlo.
yeah.
Go on. And so these are only few examples of how space has improved the business of small companies. Carlo?
Thank you very much, Domenico. If you allow me, we can stay also later. Maybe this presentation should be wrapped up by 10 a.m. Boston time, because many people have to leave. Extremely interesting. I would like, we have also the IXL Center CEO who joined us from I don't know where around the world. Hitendra, great to see you. And we have a question coming from the senior partner from IXL Center, Ron Jonas. And I think that his family was in the space business, right? Man on the Moon, your dad, Ron.
So, yeah, so ancient history, that's the whole reason I got into innovation, democratization of innovation, acceleration of innovation, was my father was head of all the propulsion systems for NASA from 19 50 to about 1970, Atlas, Centaur, Nova, Saturn, et cetera. And we had long debates about commercialization in terms of what impact did NASA really have on Teflon. Teflon was invented in 1938 or something, but there's a lot of opportunities. A lot of them relate to seeing it as a test lab, an accelerated testing lab for all kinds of things in all kinds of difficult environments. And what we've done in the past kind of history, it seems to me, has created huge opportunities for lots of people to participate in this, where we can have these microcube kind of experiments that cost a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s. So the cost has gone way down, and the opportunity, I believe, has gone way up. Having been in this business for 50 some odd years now, the pace of technology change has and commercialization has dramatically accelerated. What we used to, I remember projecting electric cars, and I was always way too optimistic about how rapidly they'd scale up and what the tipping point would be. Nowadays, most things that we typically, over the last 10 years, we could project it pretty accurately. Now we're underestimating how fast things are going to happen. And so the huge opportunity to me is the crossing of these cost and opportunity curves. The cost is going way down. You can use it just for marketing. I mean, that's essentially what Teflon is, you know, that NASA advertised Teflon and everybody got excited about Teflon all of a sudden. And that was true of Tang and a bunch of other quote unquote inventions that NASA had been part of. But so the opportunity goes up because things in the future, there's an exercise we have in IXL on GIMI called Fast Forward, Future Back. Now the fast forward and future back is collapsing, so that you can say, if you think this is going to happen in 5 years, what if it happened in 1 year? Or 10 years, what if it happened in 2 years? Because in fact, it's likely to happen faster than the kind of traditional value. So it seems to me there's a huge opportunity for GIMI, IXL, others to publicize the opportunities that have been commercialized for small farmers, whether it's remote sensing and diagnostics or dryland or waterless farming, or whatever. But I think the whole, if we can publicize how these things have become commercial opportunities much more rapidly these days than they did in the past, and how they are much more accessible to small farmers, the individual farmer you mentioned, for precision agriculture, all of a sudden, what you can do with remote sensing and diagnostics and everything. So I think that there's a role for us and others to really create a forum for answering some of the questions that people have asked today about, you know, give me some examples of how small businesses have done X, Y, or Z, or give me examples of things that have been dramatically accelerated by exposure in a space experimental and laboratory environment. So I don't know what, I'd like to know your guys' view about what we and others can do to help accelerate not only the actual, but the perceived commercial value of space exploration and experimentation, and the lowered costs. So if indeed the cost of entry is extremely low, and if indeed the opportunity value is accelerated, we can get a lot more people engaged in experimenting with things. And people clearly like Elon Musk and others have seen that as a huge opportunity at the company level. But Tender and I and others are particularly interested in democratizing this and making it accessible to lots of different people. So I'd like your comments on how we can help do that with you all and others, providing input and perspective on what's possible now, given the pace of technology change and the reduced cost of experimentation.
I will start. Thank you, Ronald. So my opinion, I have also here a bunch of like 15 PhD students and so on. My opinion is that we have to find a convergence between the training from the bottom and the sensitivity from the top. in the sense that at the present, we have in the United States now the Association of Spaceflight Professionals, a lot of things are going on in the training business. We don't have so far the enough people that are trained to sustain an economy of space. This is the starting point. So up to now, we have considered, of course, I'm not speaking about, the big companies that are already space business like Northrop and Grumman, but the people that should enter the space, they cannot find even someone that can take care about what they want to do in space, because of course they should be able to understand first and foremost what space is. Just to give you an example, on the precision agriculture, in some way it looks simple. You take data and so on, but you know that there is except for very few culture, there is no studies or models of correlating chlorophyll and other, we can say, markers of the real cultures like rice, olive oil, vineyard, to their signature, multispectral signature from space. So what does it mean? Of course, it's easy to take multispectral now, you can put satellites and so on. But if we don't have someone that is capable of translating to the people what we can observe, so how we can do? First and foremost, enlarge the community of trained people from the bottom. And then, of course, we have also to enlarge the knowledge from the top of the people that should, of course, there will be some spin-off popping up, but you know that both ESA and NASA struggle with the spin-off technology transfer program, because of course there is no community that will take. For example, Domenico and I are working a lot because for the democratization of space, you need also a community that recognized beyond the enthusiastic way to say, oh, I saw SpaceX is launching another stuff, to be attached. So you have to be trained, but also to create a community of interest. And this community of interest should also produce econometry. Unfortunately, I am convinced, I am basically telling this at the European Commission, at ESA and so on. There is no company that will invest if you don't have, and it can be also a social economy. Want to say only money, capital and so on. But at the moment, what is lacking is the outcome that is largely known. If I go to space and I produce a crystal, a protein crystal, what I told you, and sorry, Etendra, I will give you immediately the words, is not only that I can produce it. If I am looking for someone that believe in me to create a workforce, and he will create a space manufacturer and then will create cancer drugs to bring to Earth, I should give him also, I can produce 1 kilo more. The purity, it will be 15% more, and so on. Unfortunately, this is missing because there are no training people, no research on this sector. And this is a conundrum that we have to solve. This is also what we are doing, not only with Domenico, but also me and Domenico separately in our job, like for example at ESA, because this is considered like, oh, this is the stupid, activity to evaluate. But everything, unfortunately, is going at one moment in time in quantification. So you have to quantify the impact roughly, more precisely, but you should give a quantity. And this you can do if you have trained people become to evaluate, model, and so on. Otherwise, it will become still research, but there will be not a space economy after all. You know, this is my opinion.
Carlo, I would like to just repeat your words, and maybe, first of all, great presentation, and thank you for that. I want to just remind everybody, 1903 is the first flight. By 1919, they've flown across the Atlantic. By 1965-66, Neil Armstrong is asked, should we spend money to go to the moon? And he says, we only been spending 50 years in flight. And by 1969, we put a man on the moon, 50 years. In the next 50 years, we saw the next big things. And I think it goes back to Ron's point. In lifetimes, in our lifetime, the things that we are doing is far more than what we've ever seen in the last 1,000 years. The amount of knowledge we are accumulating, the speed that our collaboration is happening, that is going to happen, and all this opportunities from Teflon to the microwave to precision agriculture, all that is going to explode into the next big thing. But it will need people like you guys, us, everybody in this audience, to listen to the team who just presented and take those and say, who can we take it to in corporations? What universities can we collaborate? What teams can we excite? Because the guys who built American Airlines, the guys who built the companies that we see today were 1 and 2 to 3, 4 people teams that eventually became big industries. There are about 50 industries about to emerge from the work what Carlo and Domenico has been sharing with us. And I think I'm really inspired. And I agree with Ron. We've got to somehow put these ideas out there and basically says, what's next? What else? And how do we seize the moment?
Exactly. Thank you.
So, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen around this virtual table, great to have you had today around this very interesting topic. Really amazing. I was not crying before, Carlo. I was just amazed by what you were doing. I was dreaming, not crying. And I don't know if we are going, Larissa, to stop the recording now that is going to be shared on the GIMI think tank. If someone has more questions, please reach out to Erila. She will collect the questions for Domenico and Carlo. And so let's aim for the moon and make innovation, as Hitendra says, get innovation right and make innovation real, right?
Thank you.
So thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, everybody. And do not hesitate to be in touch with us and with GIMI, because this is something that we can turn to be successful, you know, but it's not given. We have to still work hard and go on.
Perfect. So let's bring this GIMI think tank meeting to an end. Thank you very much for attending and participating on the GIMI think tank. Everybody connect together. Our philosophy is democratize from the bottom up, innovation by training 1 million people. And we believe that the only way we're going to get there is together. So our philosophy is together we can and we will. Thank you.